Andrewster with Transportal CFB here. Look, we're excited to announce that we've partnered with Run Your Pool to bring you a weekly free college football pick'em pool. You think you have what it takes to beat our team of experts? Here's your chance. How do you play? The sign up is completely free and easy. The link to the pool is in the description of each video on our YouTube channel and our podcast on Spotify and Apple. Click the link, create a new account, join the pool, click make picks, then hit make your picks on the left, make your straight up picks for 10 of the week's biggest games. Once you're done, save them on the bottom. Run Your Pool is the home of competition, bringing sports fans and their social circles together to compete, connect, and make every game matter more. 3 winners will get Fanatics gift cards, $150 for first place, $100 for second, $50 for third. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to our pool and make your picks today. Now, enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Transfer Portal podcast presented by NoContextCFB. Going into week 2, the preview is here. My name is Andrew Wilson, joined with us of Pro Football Network, Joe Broback. How are you doing today, man?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well. Karan and Adam also join us today. All of us are going to be given college football takes. Analytics may come in there. And, of course, some great storylines, which is where we will start. Joe, we'll start with you. What's the favorite storyline of week 2? A lot of great games this week.
Oh, yeah, a lot of great games. To me, I think the most interesting one was the Anthony Richardson storyline. I think that we all kind of came in with this expectations that he was going to be this phenomenal player, phenomenal quarterback. We knew he was athletic. I think that obviously week 1, it was a good win over Utah. And I think that this week against Kentucky, I mean, you kind of look at last year, the Kentucky game is really where the wheels kind of fell off. And I feel like this year is going to be a little bit different from what we've seen from him. So I'm really paying attention to what he's going to be able to do and how he continues his Heisman campaign.
Adam, what you got for us?
I love that one. That was my storyline too. So I'll audible real quick. I'm going to choose Houston versus Texas Tech. That one really intrigues me because Houston hasn't beaten Texas Tech in the last 4 times they've played them. They've been playing them a lot recently. They got embarrassed last year. It was easily Houston's worst game, coming off in a very emotional win against UTSA. They had to go to Lubbock, an in-state rival. So that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. Can Clayton Tune kind of he didn't play bad, but he didn't get any help from his offensive line, so he didn't play well. So I'm trying to see what they do if they bounce back and they kind of shake off that hype and relock in.
What we got, Karan?
I'm going to go with Wake Forest against Vanderbilt. I mean, Sam Hartman's making his return from his medical issue. He's taken about a month off now, so it'll be interesting to see how he plays because he was phenomenal last year. I mean, 4,300 yards, 50 touchdowns on a pretty good Wake Forest team, so that'll be fun to see. And honestly, that game doesn't sound as bad as it would have a couple of years ago. I mean, Vanderbilt's played really well this year. That could be surprisingly good as a game. So, yeah, I think Sam Hartman coming back for Wake Forest is going to be a great storyline this year.
Vanderbilt and surprisingly good is not a sentence I thought I'd be saying this year. I'm going to say in the SEC. I love this matchup between South Carolina and Arkansas. Arkansas coming off a granted shaky win against a Cincinnati team that very well could have beat them if their quarterback could hit a deep ball to save his life. And then South Carolina, I loved Georgia State going into last week's matchup. They were able to take them down after, once again, a shaky first half from the Gamecocks. Special teams came in, blocked some punts, and South Carolina kind of rolled to win that game. I love this matchup because South Carolina's passing offense is going to be great. And Arkansas secondary was not great. I want to see if South Carolina, which right now Vegas has, I believe, 8.5-point underdogs going into Fayetteville. I want to see if they can expose that secondary that looked weak for Arkansas and take down the Hogs in what would be a massive early SEC matchup. Speaking of ranked teams that could disappoint, do we have any other candidates? Maybe you had Arkansas as your ranked team to disappoint.
For me, I think that the Stanford versus USC game interests me. Again, it's kind of like a redemption for USC because they got embarrassed last year by Stanford. I saw the line at USC was -9, and I think it's going to be a lot closer than that. I think Stanford is not a well, I'm not gonna say a really good team, but they're really tough to play, and they match up well against USC. Granted, it's not the same USC from last year, but that is the one team that maybe game might be a little close in the fourth quarter.
Joe, what you got?
I actually like the USC Stanford pick. I think this is kind of that, Stanford's been down for a couple of years. And USC has all these transfers in, which everybody just assumes that that's going to work, but there's chemistry issues that you figure out. Caleb Williams at times, to me, has kind of like Johnny Manziel in him, where he's kind of just chucking it deep at times. So if he gets pressured, stuff like that. Personally, I'm going to go with Pitt. I think people just kind of overlook the fact that West Virginia was going to be marching down the field if Bryce Ford Wheaton didn't essentially drop the ball or let it go through his hands for the pick six. I don't think Pitt was super impressive in week one. The defense was really good, but otherwise, I just wasn't really impressed with how they were playing. The offensive line was sloppy. And now they go against a Tennessee team that's super explosive on offense. Hendon Hooker is going to be really good. Jalen Hyatt had a big week last week, and Cedric Tillman's explosive. They just have too many weapons to me. So I think that matchup to me is really interesting. And I just wasn't impressed with how Pitt won the West Virginia game. I think that we're maybe overrating them a little bit. So I'm actually going to go with Pitt, but I do like the USC pick.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Kentucky. I do love that Pitt pick personally. I mean, they didn't really impress much last week either, but Kentucky also, I mean, they didn't look as good as you would have liked them to against Miami of Ohio. And really, that offensive line, they lost a lot of talent to the NFL draft. But I mean, it looked pretty brutal. Like, I think Levis is going to be under pressure a lot from that Florida front. And I think Florida should handle them pretty easily. I mean, Levis could definitely put up some numbers, and I wouldn't be surprised by that. But I think Florida is by far the better team there. And Kentucky will probably get pushed out of the top 25.
Yeah, I love the Kentucky pick. I especially love the Pitt pick as well. One thing that they were unable to do against West Virginia is run the ball. Tennessee is very confident in their run defense. So that's going to be something to watch. I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Adam's take. I think Houston's in a spot right here. Emotional game. They got to go into a Lubbock. They don't really have too much success against Texas Tech. I love what Joey McGuire is doing there. Zach Kitley is one of my favorite offensive coordinators in the country. This may not be the sexiest roster, may not be the best roster that they have, but man, Houston, they might be on a bit of a high after that Alamo Dome absolute brawl. And maybe they kind of got to come back down to earth, which we think that a lot of people think that they can go 12-0, especially with the schedule. But after last week, man, it's going to be rough. Clayton Tune, very good quarterback, as Adam said, didn't play great, but let's talk about another quarterback, a quarterback that we think has something big to prove, the most to prove that we think can do it this week. Joe, who's a quarterback with the most to prove this week?
Oh man, so many. I mean, I go back to my Anthony Richardson pick probably just as an obvious one. One game doesn't really determine your entire season, but I really like what we've seen from him. I mean, he's got an absolute cannon for an arm, so it's kind of hard to go against him. I do like the Clayton Tune pick. I believe that, he's going to have a good year, and last week was a little bit disappointing. But I think I'm going to stick with Anthony Richardson just because it's my storyline that I'm following. I think that this Kentucky defense is better than people think. And I think that him going up against that kind of a defense once again gives him another chance to showcase that he is actually legitimate. He is a potential first-round pick, and that last week just wasn't an anomaly.
I'm going to kind of piggyback off what Andrew said. I'm going to pick Spencer Rattler. I don't think he played that great last week against Georgia State. Now he has Arkansas SEC game. You got to show me some more because you left to be the guy. The way he carries himself. I don't know him personally, so I'm not going to speak on his personality. But if you want to be the guy, you're in a perfect opportunity to show. To show that you're the guy. And then if you play bad against Arkansas, you have Georgia next. You don't want that. You gotta build some momentum because when that Georgia defense comes into town, it could get ugly.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the guy who I pretty much talk about every time I come on here, but Cameron Ward from Washington State. He really didn't look as good as you would have wanted him to against Idaho. Like the box score says 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Anyone who watched that game knows he really didn't get it going until the second half. But I think against Wisconsin, this is really the perfect matchup for him to come on strong. It's his first FBS opponent and really like cement himself as a draft prospect. And also, if Washington State wins that game, I mean, they're going to be a real contender in the Pac-12. Like, you'd be hard pressed, especially with this state of the Pac-12. I think they definitely have a chance of making that final game.
I love Cam Ward. Cam Ward is my favorite, but I'm going to stick in the Pac-12 for a different quarterback. Tanner McKee at Stanford. Look, we can talk all we want about USC. At the end of the day, they played Rice. It's not the best competition, but Tanner McKee, he's been a guy that everyone's like, oh yeah, Tanner McKee's very good. But when we talk about some of the, better quarterbacks in the country, it seems like his name never really pops out. This could be a game where if Stanford, possibly upsets, at least keeps it close, Tanner McKee is going to be one of the biggest reasons why. And, Stanford may not always have the best team. David Shaw has a few tricks up his sleeve. At the end of the day, it's Stanford in the Pac-12. Weird things can happen. We know what happened last year with Oregon after their amazing start. And then Stanford was like, reminder, this is the Pac-12. We decide that we don't want someone going 12-0. We're going to beat somebody, even if we're going to go 4-8 ourselves. I love Tanner McKee in the spot. USC Stanford's great game.
Another one though, I think another one going with Andrew, kind of what you said with a guy that, we haven't really seen prove it yet, to me is Quinn Ewers at Texas. I think everybody's been super high on him, and we haven't seen him in actual game action. I don't really count UL Monroe because everybody's going to beat UL Monroe for the most part, but you haven't really seen him against any stiff competition. And, in the offseason, when Arch Manning committed to Texas, everybody just assumed he was going to take over. So I think if Quinn Ewers has a good game, then maybe the Arch Manning hype dies a little bit. But if he struggles against Alabama, which all signs are pretty much indicating that that's probably going to happen, I'm just interested to see how quickly people are going to turn to just say, oh, well, Arch is coming and that'll solve all our problems.
You have anything to add on to that, Adam, as the Texas fan?
All I'm going to say is we're back. That's all I'm going to say.
The last time someone outside of you said that, I don't think that was the case. But I'll leave it at that. And I do agree. Quinn Ewers has a lot. My only worry is how much time is he going to have in the pocket, because Alabama's got the best edge rushers in the entire country. But that's going to be an amazing game. Alabama, Texas, one of the marquee games to watch. What's another game that people need to watch? Maybe it was Alabama, Texas, and I just stole your answer.
I know me personally, I'll be in Austin watching that game. So that's what I'll be doing. But I mean, Joe, he's talked about it. It's Kentucky versus Florida. I want to see, because people really weren't high on Florida coming into this year, and now they're 12th in the country. Are they going to live up to it? We'll see. People really aren't high on Kentucky. I think we're going to find out a lot. Early SEC matchup. I mean, this is big.
What do you got, Joe?
I'm actually going to go Houston, Texas Tech. We've kind of touched on it a little bit here. And obviously last year, Houston actually started the game pretty well. I was actually very surprised with how quickly they started, but then everything kind of imploded. And it felt like this year was almost kind of the opposite of that, where they start off slow. They're down 21-7 with late in the third quarter, and then they kind of figure things out. Texas Tech, they put up 63 points last week. So that's not something to just look past. It's a talented team. I think the rushing attack has given Houston troubles in the past. The last time they played in Lubbock, it was an absolute shootout, and Houston had tremendous struggles trying to slow down that Texas Tech offense. So there's plenty for Houston to work out. The front seven to me is super explosive, super dynamic. I think that they'll be pretty good. I think the secondary and then the tackling issues that they saw last week are going to be a concern facing that Texas Tech offense. But I think that Houston has a lot to prove. They remember what happened last year, and they kind of have a chip on their shoulder. And I think that they're going to bounce back, but I'm really interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I'm going to switch it up. I'm going with BYU versus Baylor here. I think BYU is finally going to get their chance to like prove themselves as a legit New Year's Six contender. They've been pretty good the last 2 years. But I think this is finally the year where they can put it together. Jaron Hall is a pretty good quarterback. That offense is definitely going to make some noise. And they have a pretty difficult schedule this year. I mean, this is just the start of it. They play Notre Dame, Oregon, Arkansas. I mean, if there was ever a year for BYU to really make a push for that New Year's Six bowl, it's this year. And obviously Baylor. I mean, you love to see that defense, Dave Aranda. I think they could definitely make a statement here if they shut down BYU and really say like they're not scoring anything on us. So yeah, I think it's really a good game for both of them. Great matchup, and I'm gonna have my eyes on that game for sure.
I think for the first time this episode, we're going to talk about the Big Ten. Kind of surprised it took us this long, but I'm going to talk about Virginia going into Champaign for a chance to inflict some pain on an Illinois team. I had to get my one pun out of the way. I apologize. It's done. Look, the Cavs destroyed Illinois last year, but these are two different teams. Tony Elliott's now at the helm for UVA. Brett Bielema's obviously still there at Illinois, but I think that this could be the perfect counter matchup. Virginia, what do we know they want to do? They're going to want to pass the ball. Brendan Armstrong is one of my favorite quarterbacks in the ACC. Dontavion Wicks is one of my favorite wide receivers in the ACC. They're going to try and throw the football. But this is a big factor. Illinois has got an amazing secondary. One of the biggest, I don't want to say breakout because we kind of knew of him already, but a guy that's getting on a lot more radars, Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. My gosh, he is insane. He obviously had that massive tackle blowing up a screen on Indiana last week. If Illinois can find a way to just make Virginia stop throwing the football, or at least not find any success with it, Illinois is currently a 4-point favorite to Vegas, which kind of surprised me at first. But the more I thought about it, it's like, yeah, Illinois does kind of counter this team. They have that amazing run game with Chase Brown, who I think is an absolute stud that gets slept on because the rest of the running backs in the Big Ten are considered Doak Walker candidates, which they should be, but he's still insane. I love this game. I love that this could be either a high scoring game if Virginia can't stop the run and Illinois struggles against pass, or it could be a 10-7. You think Virginia just moved to the Big Ten game. I love this possibility. We're going to move on to player focuses, one Power Five, one Group of Five. Joe, who are some guys people need to be watching this week?
I think Jacob Cohen for Arizona. He had that big breakout game last week against San Diego State. And I think that's something that everybody took notice of. 8 catches for 152 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think everybody knew that he was explosive coming out of UTEP. We just weren't sure how it would translate to the Power 5 level. Now he actually gets a chance to go against another Power 5 team in Mississippi State. They only allowed 165 yards passing to Memphis last week, and Memphis actually the running back was their leading receiver. Emmanuel Forbes is a name I think is going to be on everybody's radar when the NFL draft comes around. So I think that matchup between those two is really one that I'm really excited for, at least at the Power 5 level. At the Group of 5, I'm really excited to see what Jake Haener can do against Oregon State. You look at what he did last year against Oregon and UCLA, and, he played Oregon tough. Fresno State nearly had Oregon right where they wanted him. It was a close game. And then, they took advantage of UCLA. And he threw for 455 yards against UCLA, and he's tough as nails. And Oregon State, honestly, they did make Boise State look really bad, but they also had 3 turnovers, and they had a couple early that made them look pretty rocky. So I'm not sold on Oregon State. I am sold on Fresno State. I believe they're a very talented team. I think their offense is super explosive, and I think Oregon State's going to have a tough time slowing down that passing attack.
My players, I'm going to be looking at, we talked about it in the Houston versus Texas Tech, Donovan Smith. He lost a job once again, but he came in versus Murray State. Granted, it's Murray State. He looked good, and I think he can really spin the football. We talked about how Houston, their secondary, they lost a lot of pieces. They kind of struggled to tackle. I think it's time to show that he can be the guy. So that's who's someone I'm gonna be keeping a focus on. And then on the other side, we talked about Florida, Houston, they coming off these emotional wins. App State, that was a tough loss. It's a tough way to go out. I want to see what Sean Clark and Chase Bryce, both of them, what they do, how they rally behind the team. You have to go in the College Station, play Texas A&M. That's a big game. Is the moment going to be too big? Are they going to be, beating themselves up? Can they reset, lock in? So I'm going Chase Bryce, Donovan Smith.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of what Andrew said in the last segment. I think Tanner McKee really has the most to gain from this week, and I'm going to be really intrigued to see what he does against USC. It's a guy who's shown that he can play up to the level of the better teams in the Pac-12. And even though Stanford really hasn't surrounded their quarterbacks, him and Davis Mills before him, with great wide receiver talent, I think he really has an opportunity to do something special here. I mean, even if he doesn't win, I think this is a similar situation to Quinn Ewers, where they have nothing to lose. They have so much to gain right now in terms of prospect status, cementing their starting role over upcoming recruits. I think Tanner McKee is really going to be able to make a statement here. And I think he's a top 3 quarterback in the Pac-12, but I think this is really his time to show that to the world, especially. And then for Group of 5, this isn't really a particular matchup or anything. I just think JL Skinner, man, that guy is so good. He might be the best Group of 5 player generally right now. I mean, 6'4", 220, he's going to get a ton of draft prospect intrigue. And I really think that guy's going to play himself in some serious conversations this season. He looked great against Oregon State, 12 tackles and an interception. I think he's just going to continue off that. Boise State hasn't been that good, but I think this week especially, he can really prove something.
I'm going to start in the state of Iowa. I'm going to talk about a quarterback. Luckily, I'm going to talk about the good quarterback, not the one with the 1.1 QBR. Hunter Dekkers, a lot of people expected Iowa State to just kind of, stay low after losing Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, who are, now both on NFL rosters. But Hunter Dekkers, he showed last week, now granted, not a great opponent, but it's not about who you play, it's about how you play. And he played very well. I want to see what he can do against probably one of the best defenses in the country in Iowa. I don't know how many points he'll be able to score, but with how inept and disgusting and putrid and every bad adjective I can think of, how bad that Iowa offense is, Iowa State, as long as they don't make Spencer Petras look like Dan Marino, he doesn't have to do too much, just do enough. This is not a game where you have to play hero ball. That's actually the last thing you want to do. Don't turn the ball over. Don't give Iowa any short fields, because that's how they beat South Dakota State. Just play safe, but play smart, play good, and Iowa State can get their first Cy-Hawk for the first time since 2014. And then for the Group of 5, I'm actually going to go back to Fresno State, and I'm going to talk about Jalen Moreno-Cropper. Adding the Moreno to honor his late grandfather. He is one of my favorite Group of 5 wide receivers. Him and Jake Haener might be my favorite quarterback to wide receiver tandem in the Group of 5. He is so electric, and coming off a game where Fresno State didn't look too impressive against Cal Poly, but they're going to play an Oregon State team that, like Joe talked about, they looked good, but they also were a little bit shaky. So I want to see how Haener and Cropper, more in my eyes, Cropper, how they're able to take down that Oregon State team, because I do like Fresno State to win that game. And speaking of game picks, we're going to start off with probably the most anticipated matchup. It may not be the best one, but big noon kickoff, forcing people to watch Texas football in Austin at 11 a.m. I apologize if you're going to be at that game, which Adam, I'm pretty sure you just said you are. Does Texas have any chance, Joe?
Don't do this, Joe. Don't do this.
Oh man, I don't want to offend Adam. Why are you going to do me like that when he's going to go to?
It wouldn't be the first time someone has. We've all said Texas sucks.
Oh man. Well, I'll put it this way: Texas is 1-5 in the playoff era against top 5 teams. Alabama hasn't lost to an unranked team since 2007. One team beat a potential Mountain West contender by 55 and didn't give up any points. The other one beat a Sun Belt team, but gave up 10 points. And you're probably going to have a freshman tackle blocking Will Anderson. So really, the more you look at it, the more it just adds up to Alabama winning. I am curious to see, I think, all jokes aside with Texas, I think how Quinn Ewers plays and how they do offensively is going to say a lot about where this program is. I think it's a good measuring block for them just to see kind of where is Steve Sarkisian taking this program, where are they and where do they need to go. I don't think that they have a chance of beating Alabama unless they leave Bryce Young and Will Anderson back in Tuscaloosa, and even then I'm not sure if there's a chance. But seriously, I'm really interested to see where Texas is at, because as much as we love to joke about Texas not being back, I think college football is better when they're actually good.
Do we cover?
That's a good question. I want to say no, just because Alabama looks like they're on a mission right now. And so I'm going to go with no.
Not the answer you wanted.
It's basically just horns down all day.
It's always, it's just, that's what it is. That was tacky, Andrew. I want you to know that. But I'm picking Texas, and I don't care.
Sometimes we have morals to hold. I can respect that. I can respect
here's
that.
what I'm picking, because if I don't pick Texas and they somehow win, which deep down I don't think they will.
Oh, it would eat at you forever.
Yeah, I can't do that.
That is a great way to think. That's the only way to think with your team. You're thinking they're going to win every game, because the minute you start doubting them and they pull off an upset, you can't go back. You might as well just find a new team at that point.
Exactly.
Picking Alabama is a lose-lose.
Yeah. I mean, I think Alabama is going to win this game, and that's really you can't really pick against them. But also, people are saying okay, they beat this Mountain West contender. Yes, Utah State's offense is good. Their defense also gave up 20 to UConn in week 0. This was expected. And honestly, Bama could have definitely hung up even more points if they wanted to. So really, I wouldn't be surprised if Texas comes in and puts up a much better fight than people expect them to. I think Ewers, as we said, has a lot to gain from this game, but Bama's winning. It
sounds like you're leaning.
I'm playing devil's advocate here, but just in case, I think Texas might put up a fight.
Yeah, I think they can put up a fight in the first half. I want to see Xavier Worthy touch the ball probably more than Quinn Ewers. However you can get him the ball, give him the ball. He's insane. Bijan Robinson, of course, we know how amazing he is, but I'm sorry. I think the biggest mismatch is that Texas offensive line going up against Dallas Turner and Will Anderson. They'll probably combine for 4.5 sacks. I'm sorry, Adam. I have the Tide by 20. So I have y'all. I think that's pushing right now. So
it's not great.
At least it's not a lose against the spread. Sure, it's not a win, but you don't lose your money.
It's true.
So sticking with SEC matchup, since Texas is going to be there soon enough. South Carolina at Arkansas. Arkansas, I believe, 9-point favorites, I said earlier. Do we think they win?
I think they do, because I really it's a close game. I like KJ Jefferson more than I like Spencer Rattler. So I'm going to go with Arkansas.
Joe?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Adam here. I like Arkansas. I really like what KJ Jefferson is doing. He looks lighter. He made a number of big plays when Arkansas really needed it. I can't remember who mentioned this before, but the one concern I have with them is the secondary. I agree with that. I think that, no offense to the Tyler Scotts and the Trey Tuckers, but those aren't household names everybody knows, and they were torturing Arkansas secondary quite a bit, and they were just fortunate that Ben Bryant couldn't throw a deep ball to save his life. It's a good team. The offense is extremely explosive. Rocket Sanders looked really good. Trey Knox kind of reemerged as a potential big-time threat. But like I said, it's going to come down to, can they slow down the passing attack for South Carolina, which if South Carolina plays like they did last week, Spencer Rattler threw 2 picks against Georgia State. No offense to Georgia State, but I like them. I think that they're a good team, but South Carolina has no business letting them hang around that long. So I think that Spencer Rattler has still a ton to prove. The other thing is that they only averaged 2.5 yards per carry. So it wasn't like they were running the ball really well, and then the passing attack just took a step back. They struggled in both aspects offensively. So I'm really interested to see how they perform there. Last year, they were also 0-3 against ranked teams, so that's another thing to keep an eye on. I think that Arkansas is just in a better place right now, and while South Carolina's, social media offseason was really fun, I think that the reality of playing football games in the SEC is going to catch up to them.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I think Arkansas is going to win. I do really like the KJ Jefferson Rattler comparison is really close for me. I think Rattler is the more talented quarterback, but the on-field product is definitely Jefferson has looked better to this point. So I think it could be a close one, and I wouldn't blame people for taking South Carolina, but I do like Arkansas a lot as an SEC contender. And I think Arkansas is going to be a really good team. So, yeah, I'll take Arkansas here.
I think Arkansas is going to be a pretty good team, but I'm actually going to take South Carolina here. I think that getting a little bit of game experience is really going to help them. I really like Georgia State. I thought going into last week that they had a chance of beating South Carolina. Now, granted, I was very wrong in that second half, but I think Arkansas's secondary is a big problem. I think South Carolina is going to be able to hit those deep balls that Cincinnati didn't. I'm just going to take South Carolina. This is also just a gut feeling from me. Sometimes there's not enough analysis you can say. Sometimes it's just, you know what, I'm taking the Gamecocks and I'm not looking back. And now I kind of want to look back because I don't want to look at this game. Cy-Hawk, Iowa State, Iowa. This game is going to suck. I have to watch it, unfortunately, because I'm in a division with one of these teams, unfortunately. Joe, is there any chance we can get the Cyclones their first Cy-Hawks since 2014?
I personally would rather talk about Old Dominion ECU this week. That's how much I don't like this game. I have Iowa State. That's probably all I want to say about it. The wave will be cool after the first quarter. It's about it. I just think that Iowa State looked better than I expected last week. Iowa, the defense is what I thought it was going to be, but if they don't make a quarterback change and the quarterback play continues, then I don't know what they're doing. I don't care how experienced he is. It's just, you got to make a change. But I think that because this is a rivalry game, it's going to be close. And if it's the trend that I think that it's headed is not a good one. And I think it's going to be one of those, again, like not 7-3, but maybe 10-7. And it's like, why did I just waste 3 hours of my life watching a game that I don't care about and I knew was going to be bad? So I'm picking Iowa State. If you want to pick Iowa, I'd have no argument against that.
There's no way I'm picking a team that scored 7 points and 4 points in the second half. I'm not doing that. Give me
0 on
Iowa
offense.
State. give me Iowa State. I'm sorry.
I mean, listen, Iowa State is the better team here from what we saw in week one. Iowa was embarrassing in week one, but none of that matters for a rivalry game. Throw that all out the window. I'm taking Iowa. They've owned Iowa State over the last few years. It seems every time, no matter how good Iowa State is, they walk into the game against Iowa and just completely forget how to play football. I don't know what it is. Happened to the Brock Purdy every year, and I think that's going to continue. Even though I do like Hunter Deckers, I think Iowa's defense is pretty decent, and I think they're going to beat Iowa State here. It's not going to be a great game, but I think Iowa's going to win.
I feel like you could substitute great for half decent or anything above awful.
Yeah.
But look, I would usually say Iowa because, they might have been able to run the ball. Their run game was not good against South Dakota State. I like Sam Laporta. I love their defense. But with how bad Spencer Petras was, and I don't even want to just say Spencer Petras because he's also a product of a Brian Ferentz offense that should not exist because of how disgusting and awful it is. I'm going to take Iowa State. I'm not going to bet on Spencer Petras ever. Like the only way you would make me pick Iowa is if they put in Padilla. I don't know how to say his name. He's essentially a mobile Petras. At least I get the mobility. I'm going to take Iowa State here because Iowa, what they did last week should be illegal in 47 states and pretty much every U.S. territory. Now let's talk about a game with two quarterbacks that, Hunter Deckers is good, but Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, I'd say a little bit better. Kentucky at Florida. Is this a letdown spot for Florida, or are they going to just keep on shining?
Give me the Gators.
For those listening, Adam is doing the chomp chomp
The
right
chomp
now.
chomp. Give me the Gators. I think it's gonna be close. It's in the swamp. They're riding high. I'm rocking with Florida. A little biased because I have friends that coach there, but I'm rocking with Florida.
Joe, what you got?
I'm with you. I honestly, I think Will Levis is one of the most overrated, quarterbacks in the country. I'm not, don't get me wrong. The raw tools are there. Like, I understand why people really like him. However, we're taking something that is this product Same thing with Anthony Richardson. I just like Anthony Richardson better. I just don't see how a player who we saw for a full season, he threw 13 interceptions, and we're going to put him first overall in an NFL draft. Like, what are we doing? Like, I understand you go by traits, and I understand that he has those traits that you like, but it's to me like almost the equivalent of when Mel Kiper put Mitch Leidner as a first round draft pick. Like, everybody knew that wasn't going to happen. So what are you doing? It still baffles me to this day. So strictly for the fact that I'm fading Will Levis and that I'm really excited about Anthony Richardson, I'm going with the Gators. I think last year left a sour taste in their mouth, kind of ruined everything for them, because keep in mind, a few games before that, they had Alabama on the ropes, and then everything kind of just unraveled from there. I think this is a revenge game for them. I think they bounce back. I think Anthony Richardson is going to continue riding high. So forget about Will Levis. Give me Anthony Richardson and the Gators.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier, but I think Florida's front seven is really going to dominate Kentucky. And on top of that, last time this website picked against Florida, it ended up getting 3,000 likes on Old Takes Exposed. I mean, I don't know. I just think Florida has proven themselves against Utah, and at this point, I think they're much better than Kentucky. This one shouldn't even be that close.
I'm going to pick Florida, but I'm going to go back to what Joe said. I am so glad someone else realizes how overrated Will Levis is. You talked about it. Yeah, he's got the rare, physical traits. He's got everything you want, except the fact that he threw the most amount of interceptions in the SEC on the 6th most attempts. He has bad decision-making. He struggles when it comes to seeing safeties. The amount of times I saw him throw a weird pick to a safety that it just didn't look like he saw. Sometimes we saw that with Baker Mayfield when he was coming out of Oklahoma. He couldn't see a center fielder safety. But even last week against Miami, he threw a locked down out route on the 2-yard line, on Miami's 2-yard line, and it got picked. I just don't understand how anybody can be like, oh, but he's got all this. Yes, he has all that, but you can't say the pros outweigh the cons when the cons are pretty dang bad. So I love that someone else realizes that. I'm going to take Anthony Richardson. I think he's a good quarterback. I think Florida's a very good team. I need to take a little bit of my bad. I thought Billy Napier wasn't going to be a great hire. Looks like I'm already wrong. So there goes that take. Mississippi State at Arizona. I think this is a very sneaky good game. Mississippi State looked great against Memphis. Arizona looked amazing against San Diego State. Joe, who's winning this game?
I had Arizona as my sleeper team in the Pac-12. I just really like what Jedd Fisch was doing, the players that he was bringing in, and the recruiting class that he brings in as well. I like the trajectory of where they're going. I just think that they don't really have a defense that's going to be able to stop an air raid led by Will Rogers. I think that this is just too good of a team to be able to consistently, score with Mississippi State. I don't think that they have the explosive weapons to continuously do that. I think that if Emmanuel Forbes is what everybody thinks he's going to be, Jacob Cohen is going to be a non-factor. And I just don't think that they have the weapons right now to compete with a Mississippi State team, an SEC team. So to me, that's enough for me to give the Bulldogs the nod here. And I think Will Rogers is going to have a big game.
Yeah, Andrew, I agree with what you said. This game is going to be tight. I went back and forth on this one. I love Cowing. Mike Leach is hilarious. Always like watching his press conferences. I lean towards Arizona, but I went back and forth. Arizona's at home, and I think they're going to, they kind of have something to prove. I think they're on a mission this year, so I think they win. But I'm not confident in this at all.
Why'd you do it?
I think this is for. I think this is probably the closest game this week in terms of picks. And I think it's really going to come down to coaching here. I mean, Mike Leach, the defenses aren't there, but the offenses are going to go off. Like, what to expect from him. But Jedd Fisch, I mean, he's basically running an NFL coaching staff there. They're really bringing something different to the game. And I think Arizona's going to win this one. They look really good in week 1. And I think they're going to continue that. I'm a big Jaden DeLora fan. Jacob Cowing, even if he doesn't get it going, I'm a big fan of the freshman T-Mac McMillan. He's going to be awesome. He was awesome week 1. And I think Arizona is really going to make a statement here. They might be, I don't think they're going to be a contender in the Pac-12 necessarily, but I think they can make a bowl game push.
Weird things happen in Pac-12 After Dark. I believe this is 11 Eastern kick, so I'm going to call it Pac-12 After Dark, even though an SEC team is playing. But there's nothing weirder than Mike Leach's comments, and I think that that's what's going to lead this game. He's going to have a weird, noteworthy event after the game. He'll be talking to a reporter, says something absolutely ludicrous, and you know what? Even though it's after the game, Mississippi State's going to win the game. I love Will Rogers. I think he's somehow underrated, even though his stats are nuts. Houston, Texas Tech, we've talked about this game a decent amount. Does Houston have what it takes to go into Lubbock and take down the Red Raiders?
I think they do. I think that game last year really puts a sour taste in their mouth. It wasn't a good look, especially for Clayton Tune. I think they have this game circled going into the Big 12. It's kind of like it's not a rivalry between Houston and Tech, but it's kind of growing. I went to the University of Houston, so I know like the fans, they don't really like each other. And back when we played them in basketball a year ago or 2 years ago, that game got kind of intense. So the passion is there. They got stomped last year, looking for revenge. I think they got what it takes.
Yeah, I think they're motivated for sure. And I agree that the fact that you combine football and basketball, the fact that both programs have, had some success and, playing against each other just naturally creates that distaste for each other. I think Houston knows what it felt like last year to be disappointed, to start out so strong and then kind of just collapse. I think that they know the disappointment that comes in losing, especially to Texas Tech. So I think for that fact alone, I think that they're going to be ready to play. Last week was just week 1 jitters, and I think that Dana Holgorsen is going to have his guys ready.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Tyler Shuff was starting this game for Texas Tech, I would definitely predict Houston to win pretty comfortably. But I think this could definitely be closer. I think Donovan Smith is the more intriguing quarterback of those two. And so I think he's definitely going to have a strong game. But once again, I think Houston's a better team here. And I think Houston's really going to try to get that revenge game and go off this week. So, yeah, I think Houston's going to win this game.
I had the same opinion when it came to Utah, Florida. I thought Florida was in the better spot. Night game at the Swamp, new energy, new culture. Utah was the better team. I picked Utah. I was wrong. I'm going to reverse myself. I think Houston's a better team, but I love what Texas Tech has going on. I think they're the better spot. So I'm going to take Texas Tech right here. And we're going to go to Tennessee Pitt, which I think is one of the best games of the week. Obviously, an amazing match last year, but a lot different with Pitt. Can Tennessee go into Pitt and take the win, or is Pitt going to say, hey, we can win 2 in a row against you?
Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think this game's going to be close. I think Tennessee's going to stomp them. I agree.
I agree.
I also agree. Yeah.
Oh, 3 blowouts. Okay. Did not see that coming.
I just think that when you look at, I mean, don't get me wrong, the backyard brawl, phenomenal game. It had everything that you wanted in terms of maybe not quality of play. There were a few players that stood out, but in terms of a roller coaster and just pure entertainment, like getting back to college football, there weren't many better ways to get us going. But I think at the same time, Pitt's DBs didn't really have an answer for Bryce Ford Wheaton outside of him essentially giving them the game. Their DBs didn't really have an answer for him. So I think that that's something that gets overlooked. I think that people just assume, oh, they had a good game because they had the game-winning pick 6. Well, no, Bryce Ford Wheaton was tearing them apart, and they had no answer for him. He was catching back shoulder fades. He was on the pass that he dropped. He was wide open. Like the DB wasn't even close to him. So I think that that's something that people are just overlooking. They just assume that Pitt is back on track. Now, don't get me wrong, their front 7 is a problem. However, I believe that Tennessee has the offensive line that's going to combat that. I think they're going to negate anything that that Pitt is going to do. Now, this, again, it's a talented defensive line. Savasi Dennis at linebacker, super talented as well. So I think that's a matchup that I really am excited to watch. I just don't think that they have the firepower. If Tennessee gets going early, I don't think that Keaton Slovis and that passing attack can keep up. We mentioned before that they weren't running the ball very well. They just don't have the offense. They don't have, like I said, the firepower to keep up if Tennessee is rolling. And right now, all signs point to Tennessee just dominating to me. So I'm picking Tennessee, and I don't think it's going to be really close.
Yeah, I think like obviously it wasn't an Iowa level thing, but I think Pitt had one of the less impressive wins of last week. I mean, West Virginia was the better team there. They had one big blunder that led to the game basically being handed to Pitt. But yeah, and honestly, I am higher on Tennessee than most people. So I think that's definitely going to play a part as well. That offense is impressive. Hendon Hooker has quietly been one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football. He's on pace to have a strong season here. Yeah, Tennessee is definitely going to put up a game against Pitt. And listen, I'm not that low on Pitt, but I'm pretty low on Caden Slovis. I will say that. I wasn't a big fan of him at USC, and I think he takes a lot of unnecessary sacks. That makes his offense look a lot worse than they actually are. So I think Tennessee is going to take advantage of that and put up some good points.
Yeah, I'm just shocked y'all said 3 blowouts like in back to back to back. I wasn't saying that because I think Pitt's going to win. No, I think Tennessee wins in a big fashion as well. I love Pitt's front seven. I've spoken so much about Kalijah Cansey and the Italian stallion Habakkuk Baldonado, but Tennessee, what they have going for them is they're going against Pat Narduzzi, a very conservative play caller. He's not going to try and beat you deep too much. And if Tennessee can get like a 2-possession lead early, Pitt's not going to be able to play call themselves back into the game. I like Tennessee. I like Tennessee by a good margin as well. So just making it clear, I don't like Pitt, even though I was very surprised. Oregon State at Fresno State, a West Coast brawl. This could end up being, Joe, we've both talked about Fresno State. Do we think that they take down the Beavers?
Yes, absolutely. I'm Fresno State is my pick to win the Mountain West. I think that they beat Oregon State as long as they're not looking ahead to USC. I think that they're going to be just fine. Like I said before, Oregon State had a rough start against Boise State last week. Now, granted, Boise State had an even rougher start, which kind of overshadowed that. But I think that you're not going to be able to throw the ball against Fresno State secondary. Cameron Lockwood, Evan Williams, LJ Early, that's a trio that is really good. I think they're going to shut down anything that Oregon State wants to do. I think that Jake Haener is simply just a dude. He's a stud. He's the toughest, not the toughest quarterback, because Hank Bachmeier, unfortunately, is the toughest quarterback, except for last week. That did not look good. But Jake Haener takes just as many hits. We saw that against UCLA last year. And this is an experienced offense that knows how to win football games. They know how to move the ball against better competition, against Power 5 competition. And I don't think that Oregon State scares them. Now, Jonathan Smith has done a good job at Oregon State. I think that's a very solid team. I just think that you don't get the same reputation as Oregon State as other Power 5 teams. So Fresno State, while they're not going to overlook Oregon State, they're definitely not scared of what the Beavers can do. So I'm picking Fresno State to win this at home.
Yeah, I'm rolling with Joe. My only thing is this. He kind of touched on it. This is the definition of a trap game. Like you have USC next. But USC, that's Hollywood, you know. Are they going to be focused? Who knows? I don't think you can sleepwalk through Oregon State. I don't think they're not a bad team. So, and if the game is close, anything can happen. We saw that last week. I think they win, but this could be a trap game for them. But I'm gonna pick them to win.
Yeah, this is such a big toss-up for me because these are two of my favorite coaches in all of college football, Jonathan Smith and Jeff Tedford. And I think, obviously, Fresno State is such a good team. They're going to make a Year 6 push this year. But Oregon State looked pretty good last week. I mean, the first half, they were amazing. Second half, they slowed down. But I'm a fan of what Chance Nolan can do in that offense, and I'm a big fan of Jonathan Smith. So I think Oregon State's going to take this game. And that might be an upset. I don't know what the betting odds are here, but I think Oregon State is a really good team, and they're going to make it. And they're going to make a statement here.
Last time I checked, it was about a pick 'em, so I don't think there's such thing as an upset here.
Yeah. Okay.
But Joe talked about if Jake Haener played for a Power 5 program, he's a Heisman favorite. I'll say it. He would be up there with like the Hendon Hookers like that echelon of quarterbacks. I'm that confident. I love Fresno State here. I think the ability for this to be a trap game is there. I think it would be a little bit less of a trap game if it was in Corvallis, but with it being in Fresno, could they look ahead to USC as possible? I love Fresno State though. Hayner, Cropper, great offense. I'm going to take them after that slow start against Cal Poly. Take them right here. Going into the transfer portal, group of 5/FCS game of the week, UTSA at Army. We know how tough it is for defenses to stop the triple option. Can Meep do it?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you look at what they did against Houston. At times, Houston just had their way with UTSA's defense. So I think it's always going to be tough to face a triple option team, regardless of who you are. But I think the fact that UTSA's defense was flying around, playing really fast, and at times made life difficult for Houston too, I think that they have a chance. Now you have to be disciplined when you face a triple option team. But also, Army has to face this UTSA offense. And from what we saw last week, there's a lot to like about this offense. Now, I would like to see the receivers get a little bit more separation so that Frank Harris doesn't have to throw dimes every single play, but he can do it. He's very capable. And if you look at what happened last week with Army when they faced Coastal Carolina, they struggled with a dual threat quarterback in Grayson McCall. You get the same thing. The only difference is that Frank Harris is a lefty, which adds a different dynamic to defending a certain offense like that. I think that UTSA is going to win. I think they bounce back. They're motivated from that Houston. They were basically right there with a Houston team that is a top 25 team. They feel that they're confident they can beat anybody, including a top 25 team. So I think that fact alone gets them motivated and gets them ready for this one.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of like what Joe said. I think that UTSA's offense, they have the ability to score fast. So the triple option is hard to stop. They kill a lot of clock. They're just going to run it down your throats. But UTSA on the other side, Frank Harris, Zakari Franklin, who I think is amazing. They can score fast. I think just their offense is going to be too much. I don't think Army is going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, I mean, you can never count out Army in these types of games, but I think UTSA is really good. They remind me a lot of those Cincinnati teams in the first few years. I think they could definitely turn into something special here. I like Frank Harris, and I thought they really did impress against Houston. They could beat anyone, really. So, yeah, I think UTSA is going to win here. They've won 5 of their last 6 away games, and I think they're going to make that 6 of their last 7.
Really don't want to go against Meep. I really don't. But I also don't want to go against Andre Carter. Andre Carter is a freak on the defensive line, and we know how Houston's defensive line was last week. I can't go against Meep. I let them down last week. Not doing it again. If they lose, you know what? I'm taking it on the chin, but UTSA, because Meep forever. And we're going into the final game, the Power 5 game of the week. Baylor walking into Provo, Utah to take on the Cougars of BYU. Joe, this is going to be an insane game.
I agree. I almost put this as my game of the week. There are a lot of options, but you look at last year, Baylor does not have their starting quarterback. They don't have their top 2 rushers, their top 2 receivers. They lose a lot on defense, and BYU essentially returns everybody. And then the fact that last year, Jaron Hall threw for 342 yards. Rushing was kind of disappointing for them. They had 2.8 yards per carry, but they had plenty of success throwing the football. And I think that maybe they get a little bit more balanced this week. I think that this year it's going to be very different when they face Baylor. Like you mentioned, it's also at home. That's going to be a great dynamic for this team. I think that playing at BYU is something that, maybe an underrated atmosphere, an underrated stadium where it's tougher to play there because the fans are so loud. The fact that it's on the West Coast, maybe there's not as many eyeballs watching that game, but I had BYU winning. I think that they just continue to surprise everybody. I think when they started with Zach Wilson, we were just kind of surprised that they went 11-2. And then they surprised us again the next year when they played a tougher schedule and had just as much success. And this year, the schedule seems to be even tougher. And I have a lot of confidence in how successful this team can be. So I'm going with BYU. But yeah, I agree. I think this one is going to be insane.
I'm taking BYU as well. It's in Provo. I think that place is going to be rocking. BYU, kind of like what Joe said, they returned 10 of their 11 starters on defense. Like, that's insane. They don't turn the ball over on offense. Jaron Hall, he's very protective of it. They're at home. I love Baylor. I picked them to win Big 12. I think they have to win this game if they want to have any college football playoff hopes, but I'm rocking with BYU.
Yeah, I think when BYU had their good season in 2020, people kind of accredited it to Zach Wilson solely, but we've seen it after that Kalani Sitake is really like a legit coach. And I think BYU has the opportunity to do something special here and really make a statement against a great Baylor defense. I mean, Baylor, one of the best coach teams in college football. I think this is going to be a great game, and I think there's a lot for BYU to gain, but I'm not going to count out Dave Aranda. I'm going to go with Baylor here. I love his teams, and I love his defense, and I think the defense is going to prevail against BYU's high-powered offense.
Two great head coaches in a great location. Provo is always a fun place to watch college football. I am going to take BYU. Joe talked it a little bit. Baylor was one of the let me reword that. Baylor lost more production than almost any Power 5 team. I think that's going to take into a massive effect. Blake Shapen, people are talking very highly of him, which I don't doubt. He beat out Jerry Bohannon for that starting job, which is now why he's at USF. But at the end of the day, they also played Albany. You have to take it with a grain of salt. I think that this is a completely different dog in going into Provo, playing a BYU team that we know is tough. I'm going to take BYU. I think that they're also a favorite to make a New Year's Six bowl. That's going to be such a fun game to watch. We've talked all offseason, Alabama, Texas. This is probably going to end up being the best game of the weekend. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Obviously, Joe, thank you for joining us. This was a lot of fun. Your Twitter's just at Joe Broback, right?
Correct. Yep.
It'll also be on the screen, but for those listening, at Joe Broback on Twitter, an amazing follow. Thank you so much for listening. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that stuff everybody else tells you to do. If you're on Spotify, Apple, you know the gig. We tell you every time. You should get it at this point. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
Texas is back.